Hi, everyone. Welcome to Journey of the Unordinary, a podcast where we will carry out intimate conversations with our guests to learn about their journeys to where they are today. In each episode, we'll cover where they grew up, what are some pivotal moments in their life, and their approach in life in general. I'm Jackie, a Chinese-born New York City living girl who's perpetually on a hunt for her childhood hometown food from Kunming.
And I'm Chuxing, a Chinese-born Sydney living girl who loves exploring life and making meaningful connections. In this season, we bring you 10 episodes of 10 guests centered around tech and data. Join us to uncover their unique paths of these beautiful, unordinary people. Find a piece of yourself in their stories and let their adventure inspire your own.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 10th, the final episode of Journey of the Unordinary. Today, we're super excited to welcome Meghan, the legend, the myth, the woman, the data scientist behind Dune spellbook, and the data scientist behind Dune AI.
Yeah, so I first met Megan from Andrew's course, like the 30-day Dune kind of course. And so Megan was the person that I think she started contributing from the very beginning, and just I thought she was super technical. And yeah, it was very, very good to have you here today. So before we dive into the conversation, can you briefly introduce yourself to those who don't know you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Megan Heintz or Solari, depending on which last name I choose to use on a particular day. I am the AI tech lead at Dune. But yeah, I live here in New York. I've got a beautiful toddler and happy to be here today. It's so funny, the 30 for 30 course, all these people are like, oh, I remember you from that course. And I'm like, that course, everyone had their camera off the whole time. So I didn't know anyone else in that course. I did it on my maternity leave, so I was like breastfeeding during all those classes. So I was grateful for the no camera.
Dedication. There's so many, I guess, web through data. I don't know, leaders now, I think, from that course. Yeah, I have major FOMO that I missed out by 1 month. Literally, I got in a month later.
Oh,
That
nice.
was like a legendary cohort.
Yeah.
So to get started in today's conversation of the journey, can we start with where you grew up?
Yeah. My dad was a search and rescue helicopter pilot in the Coast Guard, so I grew up in a lot of places. We kind of moved around a bunch, kind of all wet places. So born along the Great Lakes in Detroit, and then we were in North Carolina for a while in the Outer Banks, and then kind of like my core childhood years were in New Orleans before we moved to California, and kind of like we're in the Bay Area for a long time, and then we were in the air station in Sacramento. So every time someone asks me where I'm from, I'm like, oh, this is a long question, long answer actually.
Yeah. Sounds like you just moved around quite a lot. What did you want to be when you were young?
I wanted to be an astronaut. Um, Sadly, that did not work out. I think
What
maybe I
happened
would
to
have
that dream?
pursued it more, but you kind of have to all the astronauts basically come out of the Air Force. And when I was graduating from high school, the Iraq War was going on. So it was like, maybe not the time to join the military. But everyone in my family had been in the military for many generations before. So I thought about it.
And then with the geolocation moving so much, how did it impact you having to move around so much?
Um, it's nice to see a bunch of parts of the US and kind of understand the different cultures that are there and the different things that are available to you. And I think it also just made me kind of more resilient. Like having to move around a lot makes you better at, I think, at getting into the swing of things and going to new places and orienting yourself. And I think it's just really beneficial to have seen a lot of different cultures. I definitely see in my work life, there's a lot of people in New York who grew up in Westchester and they really think that the world is one way, and they have trouble interacting with people from different cultures, even when that culture is just Alabama or something, or Arizona. And like, I think being moving around a lot makes you kind of more empathetic and understanding of like where different people are coming from.
But now that you're more settled, how do you compare the more settled life versus moving around?
Am I settled? I don't know. I'm constantly threatening to move back to California. um, I think we like moving around, and I'm always kind of like looking at like where else I want to live. Like we were in Scotland last week, and I was like, I could live in Scotland. Like I could go to Edinburgh. But I think we're definitely pretty settled in New York right now because we bought during really low interest rates, so that really like clamps you down to one place.
And just diving a little deep on, your childhood. When you were growing up, what were some aspects or things that you found exceptionally easy that you were really good at without even trying?
I mean, I think most people who are kind of like do the type of jobs that we do now, like math was really easy for me. So, like that kind of like I think it's like a direct line to where I ended up working in AI and working in NLP is like the math stuff was super easy, and I saw a bunch of people struggling with it. But in general, most things were hard for me, which I think is maybe like a good thing. I think if too many things come really easily to you, it's hard to be bad at something. So, like, if you kind of sucked at a lot of stuff, it's easier to learn things when you're older because I do see this trap of, like gifted kids where they're like great at everything. And like, whenever they have to try something new that they're not great at, they're like, I don't want to do this. Um, so, yeah, math was pretty easy for me, but in general, things were not super easy to me. So, I kind of think that is a benefit because now when I try something new and I suck at it, I kind of expect that I'm going to suck at it, and then that allows me to like keep working on it.
That's a very interesting perspective to think about things that you're not good at. Um, are there any things that you rejected doing as a child or a teenager?
I think I rejected being rejected a lot. I definitely would like reject people and places before they could reject me. So like I'm kind of like didn't want to like apply to things that I didn't think I was going to get into. So I kind of like trick myself into thinking like, oh, I don't want to go to I don't want to go to Yale. I don't want to go to one of these Ivy League schools. Like they suck. So I would just like kind of trick myself into like not thinking I wanted those things. And that's something as an adult I'm kind of trying to like unlearn, where like you can like try for things that aren't necessarily going to work out. And like being rejected is okay. You don't need to reject something or someone else before they reject you.
Um, I really relate with that because it's like now as an adult, I'm like the only thing if I try that I will get the worst answer is no. So why am I giving myself a no before I even try it?
Hmm.
But it's interesting because I've been thinking about like why do I have that mentality? For you, like, can you trace to maybe something in your childhood where that made you think like that as a child?
Mm, part of it might have been moving around. Because one thing that I think we all see in society is there's a lot of nepotism. And like when you're moving around a lot, you don't necessarily have the like ties to like the authority figures and like people in power to like get things handed to you. Like, I mean, there's a lot of like New Orleans has like a lot of corruption, and there's so much that's like just happens because you're a good old boy and you like know someone. And if you're in a place where you don't really know anyone, you're going to face more adversity where you're not going to be like handed a lot of things. So I think, when you see that you're not in the position where someone higher up is going to be able to help you, maybe you know you're going to get rejected at a higher rate. Or you're being rejected for a reason that you don't necessarily agree with or accept.
So does that mean that if you know for sure, maybe for a high probability that you're gonna get rejected for what you're doing, then you just gonna like refuse doing in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. I think like, and this is like my teenage mentality, not like a mentality I agree with anymore. But like, if there are really prestigious things, maybe I wouldn't pursue them because I was trying to like reject the concept of prestige.
And how did you unlearn that concept, what were some things that you consciously did to unlearn that for yourself?
I think it's very much still in progress thing. So let me
Okay.
know.
We exchange tips.
Yeah, when you figure it out, you tell me.
I have another question related to moving around. So, how do you keep the friendship that you have, especially when you move around in so many different places? And also, how do you establish new like circle of friends? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a phone call person. I like talk to my friends on the phone a lot and text with my friends a lot. I think like many other people in my generation, constantly sending, memes and Instagram reels to each other. But I also travel. Luckily, I like travel back to California a lot, so a lot of my California friendships I've been able to maintain. Just seeing people every couple of years, and I think also as you get older, you know that you're going to see your friends less, so you don't have to always see your friends to like maintain friendships. And like when you have like really core, strong friendships, it's fun that like you could go 2 years without seeing each other, and then you get together again, and it's like you never left. And I think in terms of like building new friendships and circles, I think you just have to like really put yourself out there, and like you know call or like text an acquaintance or invite them to something, and like it can be kind of daunting, um, to put yourself out there with someone you don't know that well, but I think it's really valuable. I also like when I moved to New York, I just started running a book club and like met a lot of people through that. And then like I really like to host parties. So like hosting like a gingerbread decorating party and a cookie exchange party later in December, and like being able to like put yourself out there and invite someone that you maybe like don't know that well, I think is a good way to like grow your circle and make new friends.
Interesting. Megan, I have a follow-up question. Um, I personally think that, well, maybe just for myself, as I grow kind of like older, my circle of friends, I'll try to keep maintain those, but I have a tendency not to expand it too much. Or maybe that was the wrong way to think about it. But do you feel like as you become like older, or maybe like having a family and stuff, then you kind of don't really have a tendency to expand your friend circle and maybe it becomes stagnated?
Mm, for me, I'm a very extroverted person. I put a lot of effort into expanding my friend set, um, and I want my husband to spend more time putting his self out there to like expand his friend set, because I think there's like both it makes me happy. I like spending time with my friends, but like for a very practical reason, like there's all this research and studies around like heart health and like general like health that's like if you have more friends, you will be healthier. And like maybe there's some like if you're sick, you don't have as much time for friends. Like I'm sure that is part of it as well. But I think there's like a protective factor around like having a community and friendship. So like for me, it's like of the utmost importance to like maintain friendships and like um, spend time on that and like prioritize it. But it's definitely harder with kids because people all like make friends with someone and they're like, hey, do you want to go to this? Do you want to go get dinner tonight? And I'm like, no, I want to like give my kid a bath and read books to him. So it gets harder. And like, I think also the time at which you socialize kind of changes. Like, I just spend a lot more time like getting coffee with people versus like going out at night.
Nice. I'm like hearing your extroverted pursuit of friendship circle. Uh, as an introverted person, I'm like, ah, I would totally want so much more personal self time. But I'm still thinking about how do I, because at one, like, I totally agree with the safety net. It's like a spider, like maybe not a spider net, but it's like when you do a net, sometimes one line will fall
Hmm.
off, but that's okay because you have like other ones. So I think when thinking about building like a support system, I also subscribe to that notion.
I guess I think about what kind of friendship we have. Like there are friends where we talk a lot about like motherhood together, and then there are friends where you're like we just play board games together and we like think about board games. And then there are like other like just like strong female friendships where we think about like where it's like about empowering each other. And I'm like very very interested in politics and policy and urban planning. So then I have my friends where like I just want to talk about like single stair reform policy with, you know? So like they're like friends you get a lot of intellectual stuff out of, friends you get a lot of like emotional support from, and then, you know, friends where you're like having fun together. And like everyone's kind of like on that spectrum, but you get different things from different people and you hopefully give different things to different people.
Okay, so you said you were good at math, which is kind of part of the reason you now are doing data and AI. So what is your journey, professional journey, as a data person from, I guess not even just a data person, but from when you graduated college to now?
Yeah, yeah. So I studied environmental resources engineering, and was really into like environmental modeling. And that was like kind of like modeling like river systems for restoration work and wetlands, wetland modeling systems and like general climate data. And I started working in San Francisco for an environmental consulting company. But primarily, what I was working on is this thing called CEQA, which is like the California Environmental Quality Act, which is like sounds great. Like we've got like strong environmental laws. But how it turned out is these laws are often used for like I would say like straight up nefarious purposes to like block and delay like bike lanes and affordable housing projects and um, public transportation projects. So you like get into this position where you're like, oh, I came in like for this like very altruistic career, like doing environmental work. But the like actual impact of what I'm doing is probably like worse for the environment. But at work, like I was still doing like a lot of modeling work to try to like understand like there was like this big wetland restoration project going on, and like you only get like credit for your wetland restoration if you're like actually making tidal wetlands. So you have to understand based on all this environmental data whether or not your plan will actually result in like tidal wetlands. So I was doing a lot of like math and programming for that, but at the same time I was super super broke. Even though I had this like white collar job, I was living in San Francisco, and I was like getting priced out of my like converted garage that I was living in. Whereas at the same time, I'd like met my now husband, and I was just like super, super in love. But like we had just started dating, so I wasn't gonna like move away. I was like, this job is like not worth like missing out on like the love of my life. But I was in San Francisco, and I was like, okay, well, what are the four jobs in San Francisco? It's product manager, back end engineer, front end engineer, and data scientist. And like data scientist is just like the one that like made the most sense. And then like my now husband, and then a really good friend of mine, Rich Skinner, like really helped me like break into data science. And I bought this book, Sequel for Mere Mortals, and just like basically drilled it for like a month and went to every single like data science meetup that I could get to, which was also great because I was super broke and like couldn't buy dinner, and like they usually feed you at these things. Um, and then like you know, both of these men like really helped me like figure out what the hell I was talking about so I could go into these interviews and be confident and like get this job. So I started working as a data scientist at Zynga. And it was really, really fun, and I loved it. And I had like the best manager and like the most support from our PMs. And I was on like this central team. So I got to do a bunch of different data projects across all of the games. And that's kind of how I got in and kind of fell in love with it. And I was like so much happier doing that than what I was doing before.
Wow, that's just really inspirational. And I love the idea that you didn't reject it from the very beginning because you you knew that you would be able to get it, right?
Yeah, well, I
And
needed to. I think like I could have like I could have rejected it, but I was really in love and am still really in love, and I was like I'm not missing out on like this because of my personal hangups about rejection.
yeah. And how like after Zynga, like how did you then like discover about crypto and then started that 30 day program, and yeah, what was the journey like from there?
Yeah, so Raph has been into crypto for a lot longer than me, and he was like a founder at NYC Crypto when we moved to New York, which was like a crypto based like co-working group in Manhattan. Um, so he was really into it, and he had started this company Tally, and spent a lot of time talking to me about crypto, and I kind of like caught the bug from him. And then when I was on my maternity leave, like mat leave is really great, but you like don't use your brain at all. And I remember seeing this tweet about the gene analytics raise and like crypto data, because like I was also the crypto was there wasn't a lot of like data science positions in crypto, so I was like, how do I even like do data for crypto? Um, and like at that point, I applied for the program and got in, and I was super excited.
All right, so I want to follow up with your love life story a bit more. You said that when you met him, you knew that he was the love of your life pretty fast. How did you know?
I don't know if it's exactly like when I met him, but like when we like started dating, I knew pretty quickly. Um, and it was on like definitely Tinder food stamps when I was in San Francisco, so I was dating like a lot of people when met him. And I remember I'd like um, set up like two dates in one night, and I was supposed to. He was like the second date that night, and I was on a date with the first guy, and like we were having a lot of fun, and we like went up to Corona Heights, and we're like making out on the like hillside, and then it felt like I just got like hit by like this bolt of lightning, and I was just like, leave right now. You have to leave because like you don't want to end up with this guy that you're making out with right now. Like you need to go, like go to Raph's apartment. So I was like, I gotta go. And this guy's like, what the hell? You're like making out with me. I'm like, what do you mean you've gotta go? I was like, I just have to go. And then we both like called Lyfts or Ubers or whatever, and his arrived first, and he was like, okay, have fun standing on this hillside by yourself. And then I like got in the car and like got to Raph's apartment, and like he opened the door and just like grabbed him, and then we had sex for the first time, and it was just very like I just knew like what was I doing like wasting time with anyone else when like this is the person I was meant to be with.
Wow. Thanks, Megan, for telling us the story. I have a follow up question related to this. Do you think, because you said like you feel like this is the love of your life, but do you think people should really date a lot to realize someone is their love of life, or is that like that can actually just happen at first sight? Yeah.
I don't know if it's first sight, but I don't think you have to like date a bunch to know if someone's right for you. At least I'm gonna say that because I'm my husband's first girlfriend, so I hope it's not necessary for him to date a bunch for him to realize this. Like I think it's just everyone's personal journey. Like I dated a bunch, but um, you don't have to. I think also like being in San Francisco as a woman is like really great for dating because I think there's like a lot to do with demographics when you're dating. Like they're just slightly more men than women there. So like I felt like I just like had the pick of the litter. Like I could date anyone I wanted, and it was awesome. And I talked to my friends here in New York, and like they're just slightly more women than men, and I think it's just like way harder to date for them. So I think a lot of your like dating experience is going to be up to like what the pool of potential mates, potential partners are.
Yeah, I also hear about the demographic a lot, and even if it's just slightly imbalanced, it actually makes a huge difference. But going
Yeah.
back to Raf as a person, what uh, what sort of qualities did you find like about him that made you feel that he's that person for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. Like, Raph is super conscientious. I'm like very fiery and like emotional about things, and like he's much cooler and calmer collected, and I think that together like works really well. But we have like a lot of the same like intellectual like interests, and like being a little like I always kind of wanted to date someone who was similar to me and that like had similar interests to me. But I remember in engineering school, all the like guys I was going to school with were like, I'd never date another engineer. I only want to date artists, and I was like, female engineer in their class, like, oh, you never want to date me. um, but yeah, like I just like he's really ambitious, which I really like. It's really intellectual and like very conscientious, and like it was just like clear that like we were like meant to be together. And I don't know, I was having dinner with a couple of friends a couple years ago, and they both knew me from college but didn't know Raph, and they were explaining to each other who Raph was, and they were like, "Oh, it's just male Megan," and I was like, "What does that mean?" And they're like, we get it, we know what you're saying."
Wow. That's interesting. And you also mentioned that like that was during your mat leave that you started the course, and then now
Hmm.
you have a toddler. How do you balance between like doing amazing job at work, but also at the same time being a mom? I think that's like a lot of the women will struggle with,
Hmm.
like especially when they are just like have a newborn baby. So how are you balancing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like three things that are super important that are not easy to get. And like one is like I think remote work is like incredibly beneficial for parents. Like not having to waste a bunch of time commuting is so valuable. Like I think if I was, spending 2 hours a day commuting on the train, like, you miss out on a lot of time with your kid. And then like, they're sick a lot and like being able to like put them in bed and go to sleep and then go back to work is like super, super valuable. And if you're in an office, you can do that. And then the other part is like having enough money. Like you just have to have enough money for childcare or like live near a grandparent that you're kind of enlisting in for work. Like a couple days ago, I really wanted to go to this AI summit, and luckily I was able to find some childcare because RAP happens to be in Istanbul right now. But it's like $100 to go to like an AI summit. So you have to have like money to like be able to do other things and take care of yourself as well as your child. Um, and then you just have to have a good partner. Like I think that like the age of like dads who do nothing is over, and like millennial dads are so much better about like splitting childcare and like all the chores and all the stuff that goes into that and taking care of kids. And like I'm just really happy I'm not in one of those like relationships in the 1950s where like the husband like comes home from work and is like, I don't have to do anything because I worked all day, and like you do everything. Like being able to split stuff up is really important. And
Yeah,
those are three
exactly.
things that I think are hard to get.
Yeah, exactly. Because you do work as well. Like you're just all equal. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on the more career aspect as a mom. So I work with you. Hopefully, you guys can still hear me. Yes. Okay. Great. Sorry.
We can hear you. Okay.
So yeah, so I work with you at Dune. I think you're such a kick-ass like data scientist, just a Duner for Dune. You're always like up to date with all these AI stuff, and you were also pretty creative when you thought about applying DBT to make the spellbook concept for Dune. And I'm just curious, how do you find time? Like, how do you get these, like, stay up to date with these new things while still balancing having a family, being a good
Hmm.
mom?
Um, I like care about work a lot. I kind of wish I cared less sometimes, but like I am one of those people that like wakes up in the middle of the night thinking about like what I should be doing and like what the strategy should be. Um, so yeah, I just like really interested in what I do. So I think about it a lot. And I think there are like a lot of like, it's kind of like a lot of background processes running all the time about like what I should be doing next and like what makes the most sense. Like in the shower every morning, I'm kind of like going over like how to prioritize like what's the best thing to do next for like the product and like finding product market fit and like how we can use data appropriately. Um, and then like in terms of like keeping up to date on like the AI and LLM space, um, something that I like to do is kind of keep up to date on like the new papers that are coming out and like read them and try to like write like a blog summary of what's going on in them, because I think the best way to understand something is to try to figure out how to explain it back to someone else. So that's kind of like a hack that I try to do. And then there's also just like so much going on in this space that you can just like kind of keep track of like leaderboards. So you like I watch this like Yale spider leaderboard a lot and like wait for something to get broken and then like read the paper and see how I can apply it immediately in Dune AI. So there's just so much going on in the research space right now. There's just like constantly like gold nuggets you can pull out and that are practical and you can apply in your code base.
As a person who also, I care a lot about my career too, and I feel pretty passionate about, product and crypto space. But something I struggle with is to perhaps allocate this energy and this care toward the right direction. Um, a lot of times I feel like maybe I
Mm.
don't know which direction to contribute to make the most impact. And then maybe strategy thinking for a company might not be the first thing like that comes to mind. So what advice you have for someone like me who care a lot about career, care a lot about company, but feel that maybe don't have a clarity on where to put forth this care? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I think for me, like, I do often feel a strong conviction in what I should be working on, and like communicating that to leadership is like where that gets done. So yeah, I try to just think about like the order of operations of here's my like menu of things that I could be doing next, and like what do I think is the best thing, and that requires kind of like having like a not like an OKR, but like a goal of like what do I want people to do, and then I just try to map all of those items to that goal, and then maybe I use data, and maybe I can't use data to try to figure out which one of those is the most important. Um, and like I, generally speaking, drive my roadmaps pretty strongly, um, where I like push back a lot on like people say I should do X, and then I'm like, I think Y is more important for achieving this specific goal. So I think you have to like start upstream of like what is your goal, and then try to map all of your potential like projects onto that and see which one you think is gonna like. Then you kind of like mentally can score them by like high, medium, low for like what impact you think they're gonna have.
Let me follow up on this one question. How do you get the conviction about your bet? Because it sounds like you have a goal and you have an idea of how you want to execute and allocate your resource and other people's resource toward this goal. But how do you
Mm-hmm.
have the conviction to go and argue, convince, fight on people to to for this goal?
I think at Dune it's really easy because I'm working on a product where I would be the customer. So when you kind of understand who the customer is, and like, then it becomes a lot more obvious. Like I think for Spellbook and for Dune AI, they're both products that I would conceivably be using at another job. So it's just easier for me to understand like what would I need, and that then you can kind of figure out like how do I get what I need. And I think it's probably a lot harder when you are not the customer. And I've kind of often worked at places where I was sort of the customer. Like I was definitely the customer at Rent the Runway. I was definitely the customer at BuzzFeed, sort of the customer at Zynga. So I think I've been lucky in that a lot of places I've worked at, I've been kind of aligned with like what I want to get out of the company as a customer. So then it's easier to like apply like how does that like match up with the features and the things that I can be focusing on. But I think it'd be different like if I was working in insurance or like something where like it was harder for me to understand who the customer was. Maybe that's an interesting challenge for me like next in my career is like how do I figure out how to do that when I'm not the customer.
What do you think are the trajectory of this like AI boom right now, and how do you think this is going to impact your life?
It's really unclear and a little bit scary, because like for me, the product I'm working on right now is kind of like, in many ways automating a job I've done. And like that's both exciting and scary because like what happens when this thing that I've spent like years learning how to do goes away. But also at the same time, I'm only willing to work on an AI project where it's like the goal is like automating my own job because I wouldn't want to work on taking someone else's livelihood away. Like I think there are a lot of AI opportunities where I don't think I would be comfortable working on them because like I think a lot of people are like working on like, you know, call center automation, and like I don't feel good about like taking someone's job away. So it kind of feels better to me to like think about my own job and like, you know, I think in like AI is really good for stuff people didn't want to do to begin with. And like, I don't want to write SQL, I want to analyze data. So if there's a way that I can like abstract away writing SQL and spend more time with data, I feel like at the end of the day, I'm happier about it. I think there's still like a lot of danger that like this career kind of disappears. And I think there's a lot of danger that it disappears for like the more junior level. And I think that that is a little bit scary, and I have conflicted feelings about that. But like, I think on like the creative side, I don't feel good about it at all. Like, I don't think it's good that we're not going to have writers and artists. Like, I think that the AI should do things that are boring and uninteresting for people, and people should do the things that they want to do that are they're interested in it. So that's kind of where I draw the line of like, would I prefer a computer does this or a human do it? And like, I'd prefer a computer does my SQL for me, but I'd prefer like novels and art are done by people.
Yeah, it's interesting that we thought some of the jobs that we thought would be replaced the first might be the hardest, such as being a teacher, being
Mm-hmm.
an artist, being a philosopher. I think these are quite difficult for AI to replace, versus now maybe some generic programming in the sense that you just kind of like copy paste change something and not actually thinking about like
Mm-hmm.
architecture of like the whole system. Uh,
Yeah, I think like the thing that's really scary about those like simpler programming jobs going away is there was not a meritocracy, but like some version of a meritocracy. Like if you learned how to do this thing, you could get this job and then like move up from there. And the like barrier to entry was like learning how to use the tool. And if that goes away, then these entry level jobs, like it seems like the barrier to entry is really just like how prestigious of a school did you go to, like who do you know, and I think that results in a much less equal world. But like we also can't like just go backwards. We can't just like not have AI now. Like we are always going to like move forward with this technology, and we can't predict the future.
yeah, on that note, like how do we make sure, not as people who are maybe already working in the field, maybe it's more relevant for people who are coming out of school, but how do you enter a field that is relevant and is good in many sense, like you were talking about, like, you know, good for money but
Mm-hmm.
also makes you happier? How does one make that choice when they think about what
Mm-hmm.
career direction they're going into?
I think it's super hard. I think it's probably never been harder for people coming out of school to try to understand and navigate this. And I don't want to like say I have the answers or know what they should do. I think every generation is always a little embarrassing when they try to like give advice to the next generation. Like if you think about like the advice your parents gave you when you were getting out of college, like so much of it was like totally irrelevant. So I can only imagine my advice would be completely irrelevant. I remember like being in this like there's these thing called PPASs, like public private open spaces where you can like hang out and have lunch. And I was in this PPAS, and this guy was like giving this advice to this person my age, and they're like, you know what people really like? A phone call. You should just give them a call and like show up at their office and tell them why you want to work at that company. And I was screaming because I was like, what a horrible piece of advice. I would fucking die if someone like, if an applicant just showed up at my office or just called me, I'd be like, never talk to me again, you know? So like, I don't want to give advice that it's the same as like, people want a phone call and just show up at their office. But I don't know. If I were going to give that advice, I'd say biology. Seems like biology is about to blow up, and like I wish I was studying that.
So Megan, we talk quite a lot about work, but how do you think you are different at work and outside of work?
Well, so we talked about this earlier, but I'm very extroverted, but my job is extremely insular, and I really just work with maybe one other person, which is funny because Jackie is constantly in meetings and talking to tons of people, and then is really introverted. So I don't know if we have like the wrong jobs or like what the deal is, but like I get a lot of energy from talking to people and collaborating with people and like being social. So it is a little disjoint that my job is so like individual contributor, like programming by myself.
To be fair, I do also get energy, but I also burn energy. So I also enjoy talking to people. You mentioned this earlier about how kind of automating AI while you're doing AI makes you happier. So that made me think about what do you want in life? What is your goal in life? Is it to be happy? Is it to make something meaningful? Is it to have raise good children? Yeah, what do you want when you think about life?
I mean, all those sound good. Like, I want to do fulfilling work and be happy and like have my child be a good person and not a monster. I don't think I have like a singular focus. As much as like I try to have like a well-rounded life, like I think a lot about like I need to have a creative outlet and I need to have like a good like physical outlet, like exercise and like spending time intellectually. And like for me, it's kind of like about that balance of like I need an intellectual pursuit, a creative pursuit, and like a physical pursuit at all times. And like that's kind of when I feel happiest. When I'm doing all those things.
I also have a follow-up question related to being a mom. So, has your perception of mom changed like before and after you have your kid?
Yeah, I think it has. Weirdly, I think it's like easier than I thought it was gonna be. Um, like Felix is a great kid, and you also just like it's really hard to be a parent, but you love your kids so much that it doesn't feel hard. And yeah, I thought it was gonna be way harder than it was, and like I've been happy to see that you're just so happy and in love that you deal with all the bullshit, like like yesterday I took his diaper off so he because he had like diaper rash and like went to go do something and came back and he was telling me how he pooped on the carpet and like I don't know if I just had thought about that before I had kids I would have been horrified, but like in the moment you're just like whatever, clean it up. Luckily he had only peed, he had not actually pooped, he was lying about pooping. But yeah, I mean you just get so much from kids that like all the literal crap and figurative crap doesn't really matter.
Literal crap. Uh, I also have another question about being a mom. How did you and Raf make the decision were new in that moment that you were going to start trying?
Oh, we already knew we wanted kids, but we started trying at the beginning of the pandemic because we were like, well, whatever, we're not doing anything else. So I think a lot of people make that choice.
New topic. What do you think your superpower is?
Yes, it's not having imposter syndrome. I totally panicked when I saw this question. Um, I I think so. You've talked about being like a recovering like people pleaser. And I think my superpower is like I have absolutely zero people pleasing tendencies. Like it's really easy for me to like when I believe in something, like I go and I do that thing and I talk about that thing and I tell people and like in like a work setting that means like if someone in a position of authority thinks we should do Y and I feel strongly that we should do, X, it's easy for me to go and say no and like advocate my case. And I know that, you don't always get what you want when you do that, but it's easy for me to have that conversation. And I know that a lot of people really struggle with that and struggle with like being able to like say what they believe if they feel like they're going to get a negative reaction to it. And then like outside of work, I was really involved early on in like the pro housing, like yes in my backyard YIMBY movement. And at the time that I was like getting involved in that, it was like not socially acceptable and like very much like not a mainstream opinion. And like I would go to these public planning meetings and get yelled at and spit on by people. And like, my friends and I were like trying to like do a hostile takeover of the San Francisco Sierra Club. And we were like suing this town of like people who hated us. And like, but I really believed like we're in a housing crisis and like we need more housing. And like being able to like not be people pleaser allows you to like pursue things that you think are important and really care about. And like even if it's like unpopular.
I have a follow-up on that. Do you think that's a quality that you are born with of not being a people pleaser, or is it something that you feel like you develop?
I think it's probably a lot of like family dynamics. Like I was kind of like a chill kid, and my brother was like maybe not so chill. So I think when you have like a difference in like one kid needs like a lot more attention than the other kid, if you're the kid who doesn't need as much attention, you have to kind of like fight for your attention. So I think it like probably comes out of that, like that family dynamic. I've read a lot about like how people regulate conflict. And like one thing is like if your parents are always fighting, maybe you just go into your room and read a book. Whereas if you're like not getting what you need from your parents, you have to go and like advocate for yourself and fight for it. So I think people's like, I'm very like a conflict forward person because I like needed to advocate for myself because my parents were very, very focused on my brother because he had a lot of like stuff going on growing up.
Because the pros and cons with everything, it's difficult to say if that one thing is good or bad because it always like trickles into
Mm-hmm.
many aspects in life later. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just thinking about how you were talking about your life, you want to stay balanced. There's many things you want to achieve. How do you stay energized while trying to balance seemingly a million things?
I think it's hard. It's really hard right now. So I'm very open about this, but I'm doing IVF right now, and it is really, really hard to like stay energized while you're doing that because it's so much money and it's so much time, and you're taking all these like weird hormones. So it kind of like ebbs and flows. I think like creative outlet and exercise is super important. At least like recently, I've been getting super, super into like romance novels. So I think being kind of cognizant of the media and the content you're consuming has a big effect on your energy levels. And I try to kind of like regulate based on that.
Yeah. A follow up on that. It's also very interesting that like recently you said you're very into like romance novels and all this other like sci-fi stuff, but also the work that you're doing is, I would say, like really practical. So how, or maybe like I don't know, like probably like scientific and whatever, like math and stats, quantitative driven. So what do you think is the value add of say like romance and sci-fi and to to the work and to yeah to the work that you're doing, and like how does it give you inspirations?
Yeah, I think they do different jobs. Like romance is pure like energy release. Like don't want to think about work. I want to like don't want to think about IVF. I need to like calm my body down and like just like retreat a little bit. And then sci-fi, I think like directly relates to what I'm doing. Like I'm doing sci-fi, you know? Like you read these books and they're like about the things that you're working on, and you can see also like books written 20 years ago where like the technology they're talking about now exists. So like a couple months ago, I read this Greg Egan novel, and like he wrote it like 20 years ago. And so many of the things in the book are things that we have now. You know, he was talking about like using neural nets to like remove spam from your email. And it was just so crazy because it was like, this is not when Gmail was doing this. You know, Gmail wasn't around. Or I don't know, maybe it was around, but didn't have neural nets filtering out spam. So I think like sci-fi, like it's obvious the connections. Like I think there's like a joke about like going to a VC and like throwing down a Neil Stevenson book and being like, this is my business plan. So like one is like inspiration and like thinking also about like the ethical ramifications of what you're working on, because so much about sci-fi is about exploring like what are the ethics of what you're working on. But yeah, romance is just an escape. Um, I think that reading a lot of sci-fi is helpful for you as a technologist because it kind of illuminates maybe some ethical concerns that you weren't thinking about, because like they're all like kind of exploring those ideas. Um, like I've been going to a lot of AI demos lately, and a lot of them have been great, and a lot of them I've been like, maybe you should like educate yourself before you like put up such a like offensively like ignorant like demo. Like a lot of people are like building like, you know, very discriminatory like Gattaca algorithms where I'm like, if you had like thought about this at all or engaged with the idea, you would realize that you shouldn't be building this demo.
Kind of following up on, you know, the world in the future with AI. Do you And this is not a so black and white question, even though it could be presented in such a way. Um, do
Mm-hmm.
you think our world today is better than, let's say, 100 years ago? And then looking forward, how do you think you want to shape our current world?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm definitely in a better place than 100 years ago. Like my mother's generation and my husband's mother, like they were both in like the first classes in their universities that even allowed women in them. So like I'm definitely happy to be living now and not 100 years ago. Actually, I saw this question yesterday and I Wikipedia'd 1923 just to see like what was going on. And it was like a lot of Ku Klux Klan stuff and a lot of like racially motivated like burnings of black neighborhoods, and like obviously racism is not solved, but we are in a better place than like people's neighborhoods being like firebombed in America. Apparently not in the world. We have not solved that. Yeah, I think we're in a better place than we were in 1923. I'm happy to be living now and not then. Going forward, I think I'm really concerned, obviously, about climate change, and I'm really concerned about underpopulation. Like, I think that people are not as concerned as they should be about the demographic transition, and they're not really like thinking about what that means. And I think for climate change, like we have so much work to do, and how we do that, and like what we choose to prioritize is going to matter a lot. I see a lot of like kind of people who have these like degrowther ideas that we're just gonna like all democratically decide to like use less energy and like lower our standards of livings. And I think that's kind of a naive idea, and that we're really only gonna like achieve that through, dictatorships and fascism. Like I don't think people will like vote to like reduce their standards of living. So if that's not like a path forward, then like we really need to like pursue these technologies, and like understand carbon capture and like how we can like scale that out, and like which of the carbon capture technologies are going to work. We need to understand like renewable energy better. We need to understand if we need to be building out nuclear. I think that we do, but like we have to understand like what is going on and like be moving pretty quickly on these technologies. Because I don't want to live under fascism, and I don't want my kids to live under fascism, and I just don't see how we solve that otherwise.
If you were the supreme policymaker in the world, how would you solve the how would you constitute policies to solve the underpopulation problem?
Immigration, I think, is super, super important. Like, I think that we're, seeing the effects of climate change, and there's going to be a bunch of places that are not really going to be habitable anymore. And it's really important that we're able to like allow those people to immigrate. We need to help people stay where they want to stay. People don't want to immigrate, but if we can't, they need to be able to like move into societies where they can like live safe and healthy lives. So I really want to see, especially the U.S. government, be a lot more pro-immigration. And then just like we're pretty hostile to kids in this country. So like better policies to like make it easier to have children and like have childcare. I think that like one thing that notice as a parent is like childcare is outrageously expensive, but also the childcare providers are not making that much money, and then so much work that goes into like raising a child and taking care of a child that it like makes sense that you basically have full-time job taking care of a single child. So I think there probably needs to be a lot of subsidies for childcare to make it cheaper for people. Or like the other part, like Elizabeth Warren has talked a lot about, like the two income trap. Like because both my husband and I are working and all of our peers are all working, like you used to be able to like raise a family with one parent working, and now that's not really possible. And I think that it would be great if I didn't have to work, or if he didn't have to work, and like we could take care of our kid, and like that's like another way to solve the childcare issue. But it's not really possible with like housing and like food prices right now. And I think another way to solve that is like it should be easier to like come in and out of the workforce. Like it would be great for me to like just not work for 4 years, until he goes to school. But like my career would be over. It'd be like dead by the time I wanted to come back. No one's gonna like hire me as a data scientist if I haven't been working for 4 years. So I think figuring out ways that we can subsidize childcare, ways that it can be easier to come in and out of the workforce are really important for that. And then obviously, I think immigration is really important, and we should be taking way more immigrants as Americans.
Yeah, those are really like great thoughts to think about, like tackling underpopulation, and we quite talked quite a lot about on the macro level and just like the world overall. Now let's zoom in just back to the micro, like back to yourself again. What do you think people get wrong about you?
Um, so I've been a data scientist for like 7, 8 years now, and like I do think it's like your close friends shouldn't know what you do, right? It's not about work, right? But a lot of my friends like don't think I know how to program or don't know that I program, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like that's what I do for money. That's what I've done for money for like a long time. So I think like there's still like a really strong like bias in society where they like think only men do technical work or they think only men program. Um, so I think that is something people get wrong about me, and probably things that people get wrong about you too as well.
I'm curious on your level, but maybe a bit meta for your life. When you approach life, what are some mental frameworks you have for yourself? Can be as small as like, oh, how do I operate? Do I operate on like a weekly cadence, or as big as like, I don't know, the next 3 5 years, like, do I want to
Mm-hmm.
change career? Like, how do I achieve XYZ? Just curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I read this book a couple of years ago called Computer Science Algorithms to Live By, and I think about a lot of stuff in that book when I think about my life. Like we always talk about like explore, exploit, and like what phase we're in, and like do I want to go explore something new? Like even just like picking a restaurant. Like do I want to go to a restaurant that I like and have been to before, or do I want to explore and find a new one? And kind of figuring out like what's the ratio at which I'm pulling the like explore versus exploit lever, and how that changes. Like when we were moving away from San Francisco, we were very much like we're in like the exploit mode where we like are only going to the hits. We're only like doing things that we know we like and only seeing people that we really love. And then you kind of like whenever you move to a new city, you're pulling that like explore lever more. So I think about that a lot. I always like apply the like optimal stopping criteria when I'm making a big decision. So like that's the concept that like you are going to look non-committally for the first 30% of your search and then pick whatever you saw that's better than the first 30%. So if you're going to like look for an apartment and you're like looking for 10 apartments, no matter what you see in the first three, you never choose one of them, and then the next one that you see that's better than the first three or as good as the first three you take. And I could think about that for like jobs. I think about that for housing. I think about that for a lot of things. So I kind of like try to like apply these like computer science algorithms. Maybe I don't understand the like the science part of it too much, but how it's applied in my life, I like to think about it from that perspective.
And so far, it's been, in your eyes, successful application.
Yeah, yeah. I think the optimal stopping criteria is really beneficial for me because it stops you from being too impulsive in your decision making and kind of like forces you to like stop and like think about your options rather than like being driven purely by emotions. But it does make job hunting stressful because you're like, I gotta get 10 interviews at the same time. So I need to stack up everything
Wait,
at
so when
once.
you job hunt, you do actually cast a really big net first, and then
Yeah, yeah. I want to know. I mean, I think this is a good technique for everyone, but you want to have multiple offers at the same time because you need to like negotiate. I don't think you can really negotiate unless you have another offer. So like people have always asked me like what's your like salary negotiation like technique, and it's like just get someone else who's giving you a different number and then tell them to match.
So yeah, thank you so much, Megan, for coming today. For our listeners, where do you think they can learn more about you?
I guess I have a Medium where I've written a bunch of like AI and LLM stuff, so I'm happy to share the link for that. And yeah, otherwise,
nice,
stalk me on
nice.
Instagram. I don't know.
What's your Instagram handle? I don't think I even follow you.
It's MSHEINTZ. It's just my
Beautiful.
first name and
We watch
initial
this
and
and we'll
last
find
name.
it. And what do you want to learn from our listeners?
Okay.
How can they help you?
I'm always interested in talking to AI people, especially AI people in New York. I work on a really small team, and I think that like being able to collaborate cross company and cross project is super important. So I always love to jam and talk about ideas, and that goes from like practical applications to also like the ethical considerations of what we're building.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Megan, for coming on the pod today. It was a pleasure going through many facets of your life. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Journey of the Unordinary. If you haven't already, please subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you are listening right now. Also, if you know someone who might enjoy the podcast, please share it. If you like our conversation, please help rate it and give us a review so others can discover the podcast and join us on the same adventures.
Join us next time as we carry out intimate conversations with our unordinary guests to discover their journeys to where they are today. See you next week!